Philippek, in Mrs. Foley and Mrs. Knowlton's class, Hallie Reed, in Mrs. Cottrell's class, Nicholas Hadley, in Mrs. Cheshire's class, and Mrs. Lindquist's class, Isla Miller, in Mr. Edwards' class, Sebastian Schmidt, in Mrs. Ewald's class, Allison Montez Guerrero, in Mrs. Frichette's class, Andrea Bell, in Mrs. Riggio's class, Ava Baticchio, in Mrs. Bulger's class, Brooklyn Lane, in Mrs. Taylor's class, Kiara King, in Mrs. Rice's class, Riley Wagner, in Mrs. Stanifer's class, Peyton Kennedy, in Mrs. Hernandez's class, Bobby Riley, in Mrs. Sinekrof's class, Christina Hills, in Mrs. Ricard's class, Gareth Noel, in Miss Lynn's class, Ryder Gage, in Mrs. Flores' class, Nevaeh Barger, in Mrs. Jenkins' class, Kathy Ann Pennant, in Miss King's class, Angela Hamill, in Mrs. Lundquist's class, Lucas Steiner, in Mrs. Garrity's class, Anna Ladrig, in Mrs. Sullivan's class, Abby Walzer, in Mrs. Weingard's class, Ryan Diorsi, in Mrs. Foley's class, Emma Weinacher, in Mrs. Garza's class, James Buffo, in Mrs. Henderson's class, Alexa White, in Mrs. Kunish's class, Libby Schmidt, in Mrs. Wilson's class, Maddie Sherwood, in Mrs. Turner's class, Gabrielle Reed, in Miss Spilker's class, Eden Meadows, in Mrs. Nixie's class, Ariel Turpin, in Miss Livingston's class, Audrey Hunt, in Miss Langus's class, Katie Schaefer-Ewald, in Mrs. Lucina's class, Olivia McGlone, in Mrs. Rochetta's class, Dylan Delgado, and in Mrs. Shepard's class, Messita Nelson. Okay, congratulations. Let's give a big hand to all of our awesome commitment to character students with self-control. Nice job. Okay, boys and girls, this is the end of our roundup. I want everybody to have a terrific day. When you get back to class, in a few minutes after you get back to class, they will be playing and announcing the WOW winners. Okay, and